David Miller reached across the table, picked up the second menu, the one meant for the woman who never came, and tore it clean down the middle. The waitress froze mid-step. Because 30 seconds earlier, his phone had lit up with 5 cold words. Something came up. Sorry. No name, no reason. Just another door closing on a man who had already lost everything that mattered. But here's what nobody in that cafe saw coming. The woman about to walk through those doors owned half the city, and she was about to sit down at the one table everyone else ignored. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Then hit subscribe, because you'll want to see how it ends. David Miller wasn't a man who tore things. For 34 years, he had been the kind of person who smoothed the edges of the world instead of ripping through them. He folded laundry into perfect squares. He apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. He said, "Excuse me," to people who stepped on his foot. So when he grabbed that second menu and tore it in half right there in the middle of Rossetti's cafe, even he was surprised at the sound his own hands made. The waitress, a girl no older than 20, stopped 6 feet from his table with a water pitcher trembling in her grip. "Sir, are you okay?" David looked down at the 2 ragged halves of laminated paper in his fists. His knuckles were white. He set the pieces down very carefully, as if putting them back gently might undo what he'd just done. "I'm fine," he said. His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about the menu." "It's okay. It's just a menu." She glanced at the phone lying face up beside his untouched bread plate at the 5 words still glowing there. She was young, but she wasn't stupid. She'd seen this before, a man dressed too well, sitting too alone, checking the door too many times. "Can I get you anything, coffee?" "We've got a pie tonight. Apple. It's real good." "No, thank you." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Actually, yes. Coffee. Black." "You got it." She left, and David sat there in the low amber light, with his heart going like a fist against a locked door. He had ironed this shirt for 45 minutes. That was the part that stung the worst. 45 minutes with an old iron on the kitchen counter while his 8-year-old daughter sat on the stool beside him, swinging her legs and asking questions. "Daddy, is she pretty?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I've only seen one picture." "Is she nice?" "I hope so. Is she gonna be my new mom?" That one had made him set the iron down on its heel and turn around. Emma had her mother's eyes. That was the cruelty of genetics. Every single day, his dead wife looked at him out of his living daughter's face. "No baby. Nobody's replacing mom. It's just dinner. 2 grown-ups having dinner. That's all. But if you like her, Emma, if you like her, Daddy, finish your homework." And she had gone quiet the way she did, folding into herself in a way no 8-year-old should know how to do. Then, just as he was leaving, she'd run to the door in her socks and grabbed his sleeve and said the thing that had been rattling around his skull for the last 2 hours. "Don't be sad if she doesn't come." He'd knelt down. "Why would you say that, honey?" And Emma had shrugged this tiny, devastating shrug and said, "People don't always come. That's all." 8 years old, and she already knew. David picked up his phone and read the message one more time, torturing himself with it. Something came up. Sorry. He'd matched with this woman online 3 weeks ago. Karen. They'd exchanged maybe 40 messages. She'd seemed kind. She'd asked about Emma and said she loved kids. She'd suggested this cafe herself, said it was quiet, said it was her favorite. And now she wasn't coming, and she couldn't even be bothered to make it a full sentence. He typed back, "Is everything okay? Is there something I can?" He deleted it. He typed, "No problem. Maybe another." He deleted that too. In the end, he wrote nothing at all, because there was nothing to write to someone who had already told you exactly how much you were worth to them. The waitress came back with his coffee. She set it down soft, like she was setting down something fragile. "Rough night?" she asked. David let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You could say that. For what it's worth," she said, "you look real nice." Whoever she is, she's missing out. He looked up at her, this kid, this stranger, and something in his chest cracked a little further. "Thank you," he managed. That means more than you know." She smiled and moved off to another table, and David wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and stared into it like it might have answers. He should have left. Any sensible man would have left. Paid for the coffee, gone home, kissed his daughter goodnight, told her the lady had a work emergency, something to protect her from the truth she already suspected. But he didn't leave. Later, David would spend a long time trying to figure out why he stayed. The best answer he ever came up with was this: he was tired of running. Tired of ordering his life around the fear of being seen alone. Tired of eating dinner standing at his own kitchen counter, so he wouldn't have to sit across from an empty chair. He had put on a good shirt. He had ironed it for 45 minutes. He had told his daughter he was worth a table at a nice cafe. And by God, he was going to eat at one. He flagged the waitress down. "Actually," he said, "I think I'll have dinner. Table for one." She blinked. "You want to stay? If that's all right." "Course it is." She pulled her pad out. "Menu's a little..." She glanced at the torn halves and bit back a smile. "I'll grab you a new one." "The steak," David said. "Whatever's good. Medium. And..." He hesitated. "And a glass of the red. The house one's fine." "You got it." She wrote it down and left, and David sat up a little straighter. It was a small thing. It shouldn't have felt like courage, but it did. He thought about Sarah, then the way he always did in the quiet moments. His wife. 3 years gone, and the ache of it had never once dulled. It had only learned to sit quietly in the corner of every room waiting. She'd have laughed at him tonight. Not cruel. Sarah was never cruel. But she'd have laughed at the sight of him ironing a shirt for 45 minutes to have dinner with a stranger. David Miller. She'd have said, hands on her hips, "You'd apologize to a burglar for making him break a sweat." I would not. You would. You'd offer him a glass of water and ask about his mother. God, he missed her voice. He missed it so much that some nights he'd play old voicemails just to hear her say his name. He'd never told anyone that. Not the grief counselor, not his mother. Not the handful of friends who'd stopped calling when they realized he was never going to be over it, because you don't get over it. You just get around it the way a river gets around a rock. The steak came. It was good. He ate it slowly alone at a table for two, and he didn't check the door once. That was when the bell over the entrance rang. Olivia Harper had not planned to walk into Rossetti's cafe that night. She had planned to have dinner with a man named Richard Ashford at the Peninsula, a $400 a plate arrangement made 3 weeks prior by her assistant, confirmed twice, blocked out on a calendar that was guarded more carefully than most heads of state. Richard was appropriate. Richard was the correct kind of handsome. Richard ran a hedge fund and knew which fork to use, and had been vetted quietly by the head of her security team, who had found nothing objectionable and nothing interesting. And Richard had texted her 40 minutes ago while she was already in the car to say that something had come up. The exact same lie. The exact same night. The universe apparently had a sense of humor. Her driver had asked where to take her. She'd almost said home. Home was a penthouse with 30-foot windows and a view worth more than most towns, and it was at 9 o'clock on a Thursday, the loneliest place on the face of the earth. "Just drive," she'd said. "I'll tell you where to stop." And somewhere in the 12 blocks of driving, they'd passed a little cafe with warm amber light spilling onto the sidewalk, and something in Olivia, some part of her she'd stopped listening to a very long time ago, had said there, "Stop here." "Ms. Harper, this isn't..." "Here, Marcus. Thank you." So now she stood at the doorway of a cafe she'd never heard of in a coat that cost more than the cafe made in a month, and she scanned the room the way she scanned everything fast. Assessing, looking for the exits, the threats, the angles. What she found instead was a man eating a steak alone at a table for two. There was a torn menu beside his plate. There was a phone face down beside that. He wasn't looking at the door, wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't performing loneliness the way lonely people usually did. He was just eating his dinner quietly with a kind of stubborn dignity, and something about it stopped Olivia Harper cold. She recognized it. That was the thing. She recognized the specific shape of a person who had been left and who had decided to stay anyway. She didn't decide to walk over. That was the part she'd tell no one later, that her feet were moving before her brain had signed off on it. She crossed the little cafe past the waitress, past the empty tables, and she stopped in front of the man with the torn menu. "Is this seat taken?" David Miller looked up. For a second, he genuinely didn't understand the question. He looked at the empty chair across from him, the chair Karen was supposed to be in, and then back up at the woman standing over him, and his brain simply refused to make them connect. "I'm sorry." "The seat?" Olivia nodded at it. "Is it taken?" Up close, David registered several things at once, and none of them made sense together. She was objectively one of the most striking women he'd ever seen. Not pretty in the soft way, but carved all clean lines and controlled stillness, the kind of face that photographers fought over. Her coat probably cost more than his car. Her shoes definitely did. She stood the way people stood when rooms usually rearranged themselves around them, and she was asking to sit at his table. In this cafe, wearing a look in her eyes that David knew far too well because he saw it in the mirror every morning. "I mean..." David set down his fork. "No, it's not taken. I mean it was, but she's not..." He stopped, started over. "It's not taken. May I?" "Sure. Yeah, of course." She sat. She lowered herself into the chair Karen was supposed to fill, folded her hands on the table, and looked at him with a directness that David found almost physically difficult to withstand. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "You're staring," Olivia said. "I'm sorry. David laughed a short, helpless sound. "I'm honestly trying to figure out if this is a prank." "Why would it be a prank?" "Because women like you don't sit down at tables like this." Olivia tilted her head. "Tables like what?" "Like." He gestured at himself at the torn menu, at the empty wine glass, at the whole sad tableau of his evening. "Like this one." Something flickered across her face. Not offense. Something closer to recognition. "And what makes you think," she said slowly, "that I'm not sitting exactly where I belong?" The waitress appeared wide-eyed, having clearly clocked that something extraordinary was happening at table 9. Can I get you anything, ma'am?" Olivia didn't take her eyes off David. "Whatever he's having. And another glass of whatever he's drinking. The house red." "The house red is fine." The waitress fled to the kitchen, no doubt to report that a movie star had materialized in the dining room. Olivia and David were alone again, in the little pocket of warm light, two strangers at a table meant for two other people entirely. "You didn't have to do that," David said. "Do what?" "Order the house wine. To make me feel..." He searched for the word. "You don't have to make me feel less pathetic. I appreciate it. But you don't have to." Olivia leaned back. "I didn't order it for you. I ordered it for me. I've had a lot of expensive wine, Mr. Miller. David Miller. I've had a lot of expensive wine, David Miller. It all tastes the same after a while, which is to say, it all tastes like nothing." David studied her. He wasn't a man given to reading people quickly. But there was something in the way she said nothing that landed like a stone dropped in a deep well. "You got stood up too," he said. It wasn't a question. Olivia went very still. "You did," David said, more sure now. "That's why you're here. That's why you walked over. It's not charity. You saw somebody who got left and you..." He stopped, suddenly aware he was talking to a total stranger, like he'd known her for years. "I'm sorry. That was out of line. I don't know you." "No," Olivia said. "You don't." A pause. "You're right, though. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." It came out sharper than she intended, and she saw him flinch, and something in her softened. "I don't mean it as a criticism. I mean you apologize a great deal for a man who hasn't done anything wrong." David let out a breath. "My wife used to say that." The word wife landed on the table between them. Olivia caught the tense of it immediately, the way she caught everything. "Used to," she repeated gently. She passed away 3 years ago. David turned his wine glass a slow quarter turn on the table. Cancer. It was fast. Which people tell you is a blessing. It's not. There's no version of it that's a blessing. He looked up embarrassed. Sorry. That's a lot to drop on somebody you just met. I asked. You didn't ask about that. I asked something adjacent to it, Olivia said. And I'd rather hear something true than something polite. I get enough polite. David looked at her for a long moment. You know, he said, for a woman who dresses like the cover of a magazine, you talk like somebody who's had a hard year. Olivia almost smiled. Almost. I've had a hard decade. Yeah. Yeah. The wine came. The waitress set both glasses down with exaggerated care and backed away like she was leaving a shrine. Olivia lifted her glass, considered it, and then instead of drinking, held it out toward David across the table. To being stood up, she said. David hesitated. Then he picked up his own glass and touched it to hers. To being stood up. They drank. The wine was cheap and a little sharp, and David thought absolutely perfect. So, he said, setting his glass down. You gonna tell me who was dumb enough to stand you up, because from where I'm sitting, that seems like a hard thing to walk away from. For the first time, something in Olivia Harper's careful composure genuinely cracked just a hairline fracture, but real. You'd be surprised, she said, how easy it is to walk away from me. I have a great deal to offer on paper, very little that anyone actually wants. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't it? No. David leaned forward, his forearms on the table. You walked into a cafe full of strangers alone on a Thursday night because somebody hurt you and you didn't want to go home to an empty house. I know that because that's exactly what I did, and you're telling me you've got nothing anyone wants. He shook his head. Lady, the thing everybody wants is the thing you just did. Somebody who walks toward you instead of away. That's it. That's the whole game. Olivia stared at him, and David, hearing his own words hang in the air, felt his face go hot. I don't usually talk like this. I don't know what's wrong with me tonight. Nothing's wrong with you tonight, Olivia said quietly. That might be the problem. They talked. David couldn't have said afterward how it happened, only that it did. That one question folded into another, that the little cafe emptied out table by table, that the waitress stopped hovering and started just quietly refilling their water without being asked. That somewhere in the middle of it, David realized he was leaning across the table toward a woman he'd known for 40 minutes and telling her things he hadn't told his own mother. He told her about Emma. He couldn't help it. Emma was the center of gravity of his whole life, and any honest conversation about David eventually became a conversation about his daughter. 8 years old, he said, going on 40. She's smarter than me, which is not a high bar, but still. She reads books I don't understand. She corrects my grammar. And she's got this. He stopped, and his voice did something, and he had to look down at the table for a second. She's got this way of knowing when I'm sad. I'll think I'm hiding it. I'll think I'm doing a great job. And she'll just climb up in my lap and put her head on my chest and not say anything. 8 years old. She shouldn't have to do that. A kid shouldn't have to take care of her dad. She sounds remarkable, Olivia said. She's everything. David wiped at his eye with the back of his hand, casual, like it was nothing. She's the whole reason He stopped. The whole reason you what? David turned his glass another slow quarter turn. You want to know why I don't date? Really date. It's not because I'm still hung up on Sarah. I mean, I am. I always will be. But that's not it. He looked up. It's because Emma already lost one person she loved with her whole heart. She was 5. She doesn't remember a lot of it, but she remembers the important part. She remembers that her mom was there, and then her mom wasn't, and nobody could tell her why in a way that made sense. And I watched what that did to her. I watched my 5-year-old learn that people leave. His jaw tightened. So no, I don't bring people around. Because what happens when Emma gets attached to somebody and then that person disappears too? What happens the second time I don't? I'm not willing to find out. I'd rather she have less and keep it than have more and lose it. The cafe was nearly empty now. Somewhere in the back, the kitchen was winding down. Olivia Harper sat across from him, and for a long moment she said nothing at all. "That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years," she said finally. "It's not brave," David said. "It's the opposite of brave. It's me being a coward and dressing it up as protecting my kid." "No," Olivia's voice was firm. "Don't do that. Don't take the one true thing you just said and turn it into a way to hate yourself. You've decided to absorb every ounce of loneliness in your life so that your daughter never has to feel any. That's not cowardice, David. I don't know what to call it, but it isn't that." David didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat had closed. Olivia looked down at her hands, and then slowly, like it cost her something, she started to talk. "I built a company," she said. "You've probably used something we make. Everyone has. I started it when I was 26, in an apartment smaller than this cafe, and I built it into something that employs 11,000 people and is worth—" She waved a hand, a number, a very large number, a number I stopped feeling anything about a long time ago. She looked up. "And I want to tell you something that I have never said out loud to another human being." David went very still. "I would trade all of it," Olivia said. "The whole thing, every dollar tonight, without a second of hesitation, for one person who would climb into my lap and put their head on my chest when I'm sad." Her voice didn't shake. That was almost the worst part. It came out perfectly level, perfectly controlled, the voice of a woman who had learned to say devastating things without letting them touch her. "I have 11,000 employees. I have a board of directors. I have people who would fly across the world if I asked them to. And there is not one single person on this earth who knows when I'm sad. Not one. Because I never let them see it. Because if you let them see it, they use it." She met his eyes. "You just told a stranger in a cafe that your daughter climbs into your lap. Do you have any idea how rich that makes you?" The cafe had gone silent around them. Even the kitchen had stopped. "Olivia," David said, and it was the first time he'd used her name. "I'm sorry, I don't have the right words for that. I wish I did." "You don't need the right words," she said. "You've been giving me the right thing all night. You just don't know what it's worth because you've never had to buy it." David reached across the table. He didn't think about it. If he'd thought about it, he'd never have done it. He just put his hand over hers, this billionaire's hand, this stranger's hand, and he held it the way he'd hold Emma's hand crossing a street. "Nobody should be that alone," he said. "Nobody. Not you. Not anybody." Olivia Harper looked down at his hand over hers, and a single tear. One. Exactly. One, escaping the control of a woman who had not let anyone see her cry in longer than she could remember, slid down her cheek and dropped onto the table between them. She didn't wipe it away. That was the thing David would remember for the rest of his life. She let it fall, and she looked at it sitting there on the wood, small and ordinary and impossibly heavy, and she said in a voice that finally cracked, "I don't even remember the last time someone touched my hand and didn't want anything from me." The waitress came by, apologetic, to tell them the cafe was closing. Neither of them had noticed the time. David looked around and realized they were the last two people in the building, that the chairs were up on the tables everywhere but theirs, that the girl had probably been supposed to leave 20 minutes ago and had said nothing because she'd understood somehow that something was happening at table 9 that shouldn't be interrupted. "Of course," David said, standing quickly, mortified. "I'm so sorry we didn't hear." He fumbled for his wallet. "It's on the house," the waitress said. "No, I can't let you—" "Sir?" She smiled at him, and there was something in it that was older than her years. "It's on the house, both of you. Just—" She glanced between them. "Just come back sometime. Okay, both of you." David looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at David. "Yeah," David said softly. "Yeah. Okay." They walked out together into the cold. There was a black car idling at the curb and a driver who straightened up the second the door opened, and it was David. Thought the strangest thing that this woman who could summon cars and cross the world with a phone call had spent the last 2 hours holding his hand across a table with a torn menu on it. "That's you, I take it?" David said, nodding at the car. "That's me." They stood there. Neither of them moved toward it. "Olivia," David said, "I need to say something, and I need you to not take it the wrong way, because a woman like you probably hears things like this all the time from men who want things." "Say it." "I don't want anything from you." He said it plainly, looking her in the eye. "I don't want your money. I don't want to be anywhere near your money. I don't want the whatever it is, the connections, the influence, none of it. I've got a kid to get home to, and a mortgage I'm barely making, and a life that's about the size of a shoebox, and I like it that way mostly. So I want you to know, whatever tonight was, it wasn't that. It wasn't a man working an angle." Olivia looked at him for a long moment in the streetlight. "I know," she said. "That's exactly why I sat down." "What do you mean?" "I've spent 20 years learning to spot people who want something from me. It's the only skill I have left that actually works." She pulled her coat tighter. "I saw you sitting there refusing to leave eating your dinner alone because you'd be damned if one more person was going to make you feel small. And I knew. I knew you didn't want anything, because a man who wants something never looks like that. A man who wants something is always looking at the door." She almost smiled. "You never once looked at the door, David. Not the whole night. Do you know how rare that is?" David didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that was true. "Will I see you again?" The question hung there in the cold night air between two people who had 2 hours earlier been complete strangers, stood up by other people entirely. Olivia Harper opened her mouth to give the answer she always gave, the careful one, the safe one, the one that kept everyone at exactly the right distance. "I don't think that's a good idea. My life is complicated. Let's just let tonight be tonight." And instead, standing on a sidewalk in front of a closing cafe, looking at a man in a shirt he'd ironed for 45 minutes, she heard herself say something else entirely. "Same table," she said. "Next Thursday, 7 o'clock. David blinked. "You're serious?" "I'm never anything but serious. It's one of my worst qualities." She turned toward the car, then stopped her hand on the door. "David." "Yeah, your daughter." Olivia's composure was back in place now, the armor sliding down over whatever had cracked open inside the cafe, but her eyes, when she looked at him, were not armored at all. "The one who climbs into your lap when you're sad. Tell her—" She stopped. Started again. "Tell her that her father is a good man. Tell her a stranger said so. Sometimes it helps hearing it from someone who has no reason to say it." And before David could answer, she was in the car, and the door was closing, and the black shape of it was pulling away from the curb into the river of red taillights gone. David stood alone on the sidewalk for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone, and he called home, and his mother answered on the second ring in a low voice, so she wouldn't wake the sleeping child. "David? How did it go? Did you have a nice time with—" "She didn't come, Mom." "Oh, honey. Oh, David, I'm so—" "No." He looked at the empty space at the curb where the car had been. A slow, strange, disbelieving smile spread across his face, the first real one in longer than he could remember. "No, Mom. It's okay. It's a long story. Is Emma asleep?" "Out like a light. She fought it, but she went down around 9. His mother hesitated. "She made me promise to wake her when you got home. She wanted to hear how it went." David closed his eyes. "Don't wake her," he said softly. "Let her sleep. I'll be there in 20 minutes. A pause. "Mom." "Yes, honey." "Tell her in the morning." His voice caught. "Tell her Daddy had a good night. Tell her sometimes people don't come. But sometimes somebody else does." The morning after Emma Miller sat at the breakfast table with her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth, staring at her father like he'd grown a second head. "You're humming," she said. David looked up from the eggs he was scrambling. "I'm not humming." "You are. You were humming just now. You never hum." She narrowed her eyes, and it was such a perfect imitation of her mother's suspicious look that David had to turn back to the stove so she wouldn't see his face do something complicated. "Grandma said the lady didn't come to your dinner." "She didn't. So why are you humming?" David set the pan down and came over and sat across from his daughter, and he thought about how to explain a thing he didn't fully understand himself. "You know how sometimes," he said, "a day starts out really bad and you think the whole thing is ruined. And then something happens at the very end that you never saw coming, and it turns the whole day around." Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Like when I lost my library book and cried, and then it turned out it was under the couch the whole time." "Sort of like that, yeah." "So what was under the couch?" David laughed, a real one, surprising himself. "A person," he said. "A person was under the couch." "That doesn't make sense." "No," David agreed. "It really doesn't. Eat your eggs." He didn't tell her more than that. He didn't know how. What was he supposed to say? A billionaire sat down at my table and held my hand and cried, and I'm seeing her again on Thursday. It sounded insane, even inside his own head. In the cold light of Friday morning, standing at his own kitchen counter in the same apartment he'd lived in for 9 years. The whole night felt like something he'd invented. A woman like that. A cafe like that. It couldn't have been real. Except that when he checked his phone, there was a message from a number he didn't recognize. "You never gave me your number. I had to call the cafe and describe you to the girl who works nights. She said, and I quote, 'the sad, handsome one who tore up the menu.' So now you know how she sees you and how much trouble I went to. Thursday. 7. Don't be late. O.H. David read it 4 times. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets, holding the phone against his chest. And he laughed until his eyes stung, and Emma leaned over the edge of the table and looked down at her father sitting on the floor and said, "Daddy, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, baby. Yeah, I really think I might be." Sound. Thursday could not come fast enough, and then it came too fast. At 6 o'clock, David stood in front of his closet in a panic, and it was Emma, 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on his bed, who ran the whole operation. "Not that one," she said. "That one makes you look like you're going to a funeral." "Emma?" "It does. Wear the blue one. Mom liked the blue one." David went still with a shirt in his hand. It didn't happen often anymore. Emma bringing up Sarah on her own. She kept her mother in some private room inside herself and only opened the door when she chose to. He set the funeral shirt down and pulled the blue one off its hanger. "You remember that?" he asked carefully. "That Mom liked this one. I remember she said you looked handsome in it. She said it made your eyes look bluer." Emma picked at the bedspread. "Is that okay?" "That I said that." David crossed the room and knelt in front of his daughter and took both her small hands in his. "That is more than okay," he said. "That is the best thing you could have said to me. You know that you keep those. All those little things you remember about Mom. You hold on to every single one because those are treasure, Emma. Those are the most valuable things in the whole world." Emma nodded solemn. Then she said, "Is the lady going to be Mom's replacement?" And there it was. The question she'd been circling since he'd told her 3 days ago, in the most careful language he could find, that he'd made a new friend, and he was going to have dinner with her. "No," David said. "Nobody replaces Mom. Ever. That's not how it works. Your mom has a spot in this family that's hers forever, and nobody can ever stand in it. This is a different thing. This is a—" He searched. "You know how you've got room in your heart for me and Grandma and your best friend Sophie and Mom all at the same time, and loving one of them doesn't use up the love for the others?" Emma nodded slowly. "Hearts don't run out," David said. "That's the secret. That's the thing nobody tells you. You'd think there's only so much love, and once you spend it, it's gone. But it's the opposite. The more you spend, the more you've got. Your heart's not a wallet, baby. It's a well. And the more water you take out, the higher it fills back up. Emma looked at him for a long moment with her mother's eyes. Then she reached out and straightened his collar with her small, serious hands, the way she'd seen her mother do it in photographs, and once in a memory she wasn't sure was real. "Okay," she said. "You can go. But Daddy, yeah. If she makes you sad, I'll beat her up." David laughed so hard he had to sit down on the edge of the bed. "Deal," he said, wiping his eyes. "It's a deal." Olivia was already there when he arrived at the same table, and the sight of her stopped him 3 steps inside the door. She looked different. It took him a second to understand why. The first night she'd worn armor, the coat, the shoes, the stillness. Tonight she wore a simple dark sweater, and her hair was down, and she'd come without whatever it was that had made rooms rearrange themselves around her. She looked, David thought, like a person instead of a portrait. "You're staring again," she said without looking up from the menu. "You look different." "I look like a human being. It's disorienting, I know. I barely recognize myself." She set the menu down. "Sit, David. You're making the waitress nervous. She's decided we're a great romance, and she's very invested. She told me she's been telling her roommate about us all week." David sat. "We're not a great romance." "No?" Olivia agreed. "We're 2 people who got stood up and decided to make a habit of it. Which is either much sadder or much better. I haven't decided." "Better," David said. "Definitely better." She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her expression flickered. "You wore blue." "My daughter picked it. She ran the whole operation. She's got opinions. Tell me about her." Olivia leaned forward, and it wasn't the polite lean of someone making conversation. It was hungry, almost the lean of someone who'd been starving for the ordinary and didn't know it until it was in front of her. "I want to hear all of it. What she said today. What she had for breakfast. I want the whole thing." So he told her. And this became the shape of it, the thing that started that Thursday and continued week after week at the same table in the same low amber light. David would arrive with a week's worth of Emma stories saved up like coins, and Olivia would sit across from him and drink them in like a woman at a well. Emma had gotten 100 on her spelling test. Emma had decided she was going to be a marine biologist, and then 4 days later an astronaut, and then David suspected both simultaneously. Emma had asked why the sky was blue, and David hadn't known, and they'd looked it up together, and now Emma explained Rayleigh scattering to strangers at the grocery store. "She sounds," Olivia said one night 3 weeks in, "like the single most alive person I've ever heard of." "She is." David turned his water glass. "You should meet her sometime." He said it lightly, casually, and then immediately wished he could pull the words back out of the air because he watched something close in Olivia's face, like a door swinging shut. "No," she said. "Olivia." "No, David." She set her fork down. "We don't do that. That's the one line. I come here and we talk, and it's the best thing in my week, and I mean that more than you know, but I don't meet your daughter. Not ever." David sat back, stung. "Why not?" "Because you already told me why not." Olivia's voice was quiet, but absolutely firm. "The first night. You told me you don't bring people around Emma because she's already lost one person she loved and you won't risk her losing another. You were right. That was the wisest thing anyone said to me in years, and I'm not going to be the thing that makes you break your own rule and then regret it." She met his eyes. "I'm not stable, David. My life isn't stable. I could be pulled to Singapore for a month tomorrow. There could be a crisis that eats my life whole for a quarter. I am not a person you can promise an 8-year-old will keep showing up, so I won't let you make that promise. I care about her too much, and I've never even met her." David didn't say anything for a moment. "That might be the kindest and the saddest thing anybody's ever said to me," he said finally. "I contain multitudes," Olivia said dryly. "Eat your steak." But it sat there between them. After that, the shape of a little girl neither of them would let into the room, the promise David wouldn't make, and Olivia wouldn't let him make a locked door in the middle of the one good thing in both their lives. The weeks stacked up, spring came on, and somewhere in there, without either of them naming it, the cafe became the truest place in both their lives. David learned things about Olivia Harper that he was fairly sure no one else on earth knew. He learned that she'd grown up poor, genuinely. Poor, not the sanitized rags-to-riches version she trotted out for magazine profiles, but the real thing, the kind where the electricity got shut off, and you did your homework by candlelight and told your friends it was a fun family tradition. "My mother worked 3 jobs," Olivia said one night, and she said it staring at the table, not at him. 3. And she still couldn't She stopped, started again. "There was a night I was maybe 9, Emma's age, and my mother sat me down and told me there was no dinner. Not that dinner was late, that there wasn't any. And she cried and she apologized. And I remember deciding right there at 9 years old that I was never going to be in a position where somebody I loved had to apologize to me for something that wasn't their fault." She looked up. "So I built the company. And I built it so big and so bulletproof that no one I loved would ever go hungry again." A hollow laugh. "And then I forgot to have anyone I loved. Turns out that part doesn't come automatically. Nobody tells you that. Your mother," David said gently. "Is she?" "Gone. 6 years now. She got to see it at least. She got to see the company go public. I bought her a house." Olivia's jaw tightened. "She died in it 8 months later. I gave her a house and 8 months. I'd have given the whole company for 8 years. She shook her head sharply, like clearing water from her ears. "I've never told anyone that. About the dinner. About my mother crying." "Why me?" Olivia looked at him. "Because you told me your daughter climbs into your lap. You gave me the truest thing about you before I asked for it. It seemed only fair." And David in turn told her the things he'd never told the grief counselor. He told her about the voicemails, about how he still had 11 saved messages from Sarah, and how sometimes on the bad nights he'd play them just to hear her say his name. He'd braced for Olivia to find it pathetic. Instead, she'd gone very quiet. "Play me one," she said. "What, ma? Play me one. I want to hear her voice. I want to know what she sounded like, the woman who married a man who apologizes to furniture." So David, with shaking hands in a nearly empty cafe, had pulled out his phone and played a 9-second voicemail from a dead woman. "Hey, it's me. Don't forget. Emma's got the dentist at 4, and we're out of milk, and I love you, you big goofbye." And Olivia Harper had listened to it with her hand over her mouth, and when it ended, she'd said in a whisper, "She sounds like sunshine." And David had said, "She was." And neither of them had been able to speak for a while after that. "You know what the cruelest thing is?" David said eventually. "It's not the big stuff. Everybody thinks it's the big stuff, the holidays, the anniversaries. It's not. It's the milk. It's standing in the grocery store at 9 p.m., buying milk, and realizing there's nobody to text about it. The specific, stupid, tiny things that used to be shared, and now they're just yours, alone, forever." He looked at Olivia. "You want to know if I'm lonely? I've got a kid I love more than my own life, and a whole apartment full of her noise, and I am still somehow the loneliest I've ever been, because there's nobody to buy the milk with." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. She did it easily now. The touch that had made her cry the first night had become the most natural thing in the world. "I'll buy the milk with you," she said. David went still. "I don't mean..." Olivia looked flustered for the first time he'd ever seen. "I mean, metaphorically. I mean, text me. About the milk. About the stupid small things. I've never had anyone to be small with. Everything's always enormous. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every dinner is a deal. Let me buy the milk with you. Metaphorically." "Metaphorically," David repeated, and something in his chest was doing something dangerous. "Metaphorically," Olivia said firmly, and took her hand back and picked up her wine and would not look at him. That was the night it changed, though neither of them said so. After that they texted. Not constantly, Olivia's life didn't allow constant, but in fragments all week long in the cracks of two busy lives. David would text out of milk thought of you, and Olivia in a boardroom in another time zone would feel her phone buzz and would have to fight to keep the smile off her face, while a man in a $6,000 suit explained why they needed to acquire a company in Rotterdam. Olivia would text, just told a room full of men twice my age that they were wrong, and I was right, and they had to sit there and take it. I wish you could have seen it, and David, folding Emma's laundry into perfect squares, would grin at his phone like an idiot. Emma noticed, of course. Emma noticed everything. "You're texting the couch person again," she said one evening, not looking up from her homework. "The what?" "The person who was under the couch. That turned your bad day around. You're always texting her now." Emma erased something with great violence. "Is she nice?" David set his phone down. "Yeah, baby, she's really nice." "Nicer than the lady who didn't come to dinner." "Way nicer." Emma nodded, absorbing this. "Does she know about me?" David hesitated. "She knows all about you. She thinks you're the most interesting person she's ever heard of. She asks about you every time we talk." Emma's pencil stopped. She looked up, and there was something so naked and hopeful in her face that it broke David's heart clean in half. "She does. Every time. I tell her all your stories. The spelling test, the astronaut thing. She loves the astronaut thing." "Can I meet her?" And there it was again. The question. The locked door. "Maybe someday, sweetheart," David said, and hated himself for the lie inside the word, maybe because he knew what Olivia had said, and he knew she meant it, and he knew that maybe someday was just a kind way of saying no. Emma looked at him for a long moment. "You always say maybe someday when you mean no," she said quietly, and went back to her homework, and David sat there feeling like the worst father who had ever lived. Chapter. He brought it up the next Thursday. "Emma asked to meet you again." Olivia's face closed. "David, just let me say it. Please." He put his hands flat on the table. "I know what you said. I know about the Singapore thing and the crisis thing and how you can't promise to keep showing up. I heard you. But here's what I keep coming back to." He leaned forward. "You've shown up. Every Thursday. 7 o'clock. For 2 months. Rain, snow, the night you had a fever, and came anyway, the night your assistant called you 11 times and you turned your phone off. You have never once, not one time, not been at this table when you said you'd be. You know how many people in my life I can say that about? Since Sarah died too. My mother. And you." Olivia said nothing. "You keep telling me you're not stable," David said. "You keep telling me you're the person who disappears. But that's not the person I've watched for 2 months. That's just the person you're afraid you are. And I think," his voice caught, "I think you've been telling yourself that story for so long that you can't see it isn't true anymore. Maybe it was true once. Maybe you were that person once when the company was young and everything was on fire. But the woman who sat across from me every Thursday for 9 weeks straight, she's the most reliable person I know." A long silence. "That's not fair," Olivia said finally, and her voice was not steady. "What's not fair?" "Using my own consistency against me. I've worked very hard to be unavailable. You're ruining it." David almost laughed, but he could see she was close to something teetering on an edge, so he held still. "If I meet her," Olivia said slowly, "and she likes me, and I like her, which, David, I already do. I already love her, and I've never laid eyes on her. Do you understand how insane that is? If she gets attached, and then something happens and I have to disappear, then you'll have given her something real for as long as you were there," David said. "That's the part I got wrong. That first night, I told you I'd rather Emma have less and keep it than have more and lose it. I've been living by that for 3 years. But I was wrong, Olivia. I was so wrong. You don't protect a kid from loss by keeping the whole world away from her. You just teach her the world's a small, scared place." Sarah gave Emma 5 years of the most enormous love, and yeah, losing it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. But would she trade it? Would she give back those 5 years to have never hurt? Never. Not in a million years. Because those 5 years are who she is. His eyes were wet now. I don't want to raise a kid who's never lost anything, because she was never allowed to love anything. I want to raise a kid who knows that people are worth the risk, and I can't teach her that if I won't take it myself. Olivia Harper looked at him across the table, and for a long moment she was completely silent. "When?" she said. David's heart stopped. "When what? When do I meet her?" Olivia's hands were trembling slightly, and she pressed them flat on the table to still them. "If we're doing this, and God help me, I think we're doing this, then I want it done right. I want to meet her somewhere she feels safe. I don't want to overwhelm her. I've read—" She stopped, embarrassed. "I've read some things about introducing a new adult to a grieving child. I did research weeks ago. I didn't tell you." David stared at her. "You did research." "I did extensive research," Olivia said with wounded dignity. "I acquire companies for a living, David. I don't walk into anything unprepared. I've read 4 books on childhood grief. I know about the danger of moving too fast. I know I'm supposed to let her set the pace. I know I'm not supposed to try to be her mother or her friend or anything. I'm supposed to just be a safe, consistent adult who shows up and doesn't need anything from her." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I've been getting ready to meet a little girl I said I'd never meet. For weeks. Because I already knew. I knew the second you said she climbs into your lap. I knew I was going to lose this argument. I just needed you to have it with me so I couldn't blame myself." David reached across the table and took her hand in both of his and pressed it to his forehead, and he didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say that his hands didn't say better. "Saturday," he said finally into her knuckles. "The park by our place. There's a duck pond. Emma loves the ducks. It's easy, she can walk away if she wants. She can hide behind me. There's no pressure. It's just ducks. We'll just be 3 people looking at ducks." "3 people looking at ducks," Olivia repeated. "The single most terrifying business meeting of my life." "You'll be great. I've addressed the United Nations. I've rung the opening bell at the stock exchange. I once told a sitting senator he was an idiot to his face on live television." Olivia pulled her hand back and pressed both of them to her stomach. "And I have never in my life been as scared as I am right now about looking at ducks with an 8-year-old. "That's how I know you'll be great," David said softly. "The people who should be scared never are. It's the ones who are scared who love hard enough to be worth it." Chug. Saturday came gray and cold, and David nearly called it off 3 times. Emma didn't know. That had been Olivia's idea, actually delivered over text at midnight when neither of them could sleep. "Don't tell her it's a meeting. Don't build it up. If she knows it's important, she'll feel pressure, and pressure is the enemy. Just tell her you're going to see the ducks and a friend of yours might come by. Make me small. Make me easy to say no to." So David had said over breakfast as casually as he could manage, "Hey, want to go feed the ducks this morning?" And Emma had said yes because Emma always said yes to ducks. And on the walk over he'd added light as air. "My friend might come by the way, the nice one. She's never seen the pond." And Emma had gone quiet for exactly 4 steps and then said, "The couch person." And David had said, "Yeah, her name's Olivia." And Emma had said, "Okay," and reached up and taken his hand a little tighter, and that was all. Olivia was already at the pond when they came over the little rise. And David watched it happen, watched the woman who ran an empire spot a small girl in a red coat and go absolutely rigid with terror, watched her start to lift a hand in greeting and then think better of it, watched every ounce of her billion-dollar composure evaporate in the face of one 8-year-old. Emma stopped walking. "That's her," she whispered. "That's her." Emma studied Olivia from 30 feet away, with the frank, merciless assessment that only small children can manage. Olivia stood by the pond and let herself be studied, and to her enormous credit, she did not smile too big or wave or do any of the things that scare wary children. She just stood there, terrified and still, and let the little girl look. "She looks nervous," Emma said. "She is nervous." "Why?" David crouched down to his daughter's level. "Because," he said, "she really, really wants you to like her. And when you really want somebody to like you, it makes you nervous. You know that feeling." Emma nodded slowly. "The first day of school feeling." "Exactly like that. She's having the first day of school feeling, right now, about meeting you." Emma looked at Olivia again, and something shifted in her small face, some flicker of recognition, of sympathy, of the deep-running kindness that David had spent 8 years trying to grow in her, and that had apparently taken root all on its own. She let go of David's hand, and she walked toward Olivia Harper across the cold grass, this 8-year-old in a red coat, and she stopped in front of the most powerful woman David had ever met, and she looked up at her and said, "You don't have to be nervous. The ducks like everybody, even nervous people." David watched Olivia Harper, CEO, Billionaire. The woman who'd made senators sweat, dropped to her knees on the wet grass in front of his daughter, heedless of what it did to her coat so that she'd be at eye level, and he watched her open her mouth to say something and find that she couldn't, and he watched her try again. "Thank you," Olivia managed, and her voice was not the voice that ran boardrooms. It was small, and it shook. That's very good to know. I've never been very good at not being nervous." "You get used to it," Emma said solemnly. "I was nervous on my first day of school, and my mom said, just find one person who looks nice and stand near them. So I did, and then she was my friend." Emma tilted her head. "You can stand near me if you want, since you're new." And Olivia Harper, who had told David 9 weeks ago that there was not one single person on earth who knew when she was sad, knelt on the wet grass by a duck pond and pressed her hand over her mouth and started silently, helplessly to cry. And Emma, 8 years old, who understood better than anyone alive what it looked like when a grown-up was trying not to fall apart, stepped forward without hesitation and put her small arms around the neck of a woman she'd known for 90 seconds. "It's okay," Emma whispered, patting Olivia's back the way she patted her father's on the bad nights. "It's okay. The ducks are really nice. You'll see." Over the top of his daughter's head, Olivia found David's eyes. And she didn't say anything because she couldn't, but she didn't have to. David stood a little way off by the cold pond with his hands in his pockets and his own face wet, and he thought about a night 9 weeks ago when he'd torn a menu in half in an empty cafe and been certain, absolutely certain, that the whole rest of his life was going to be exactly that. Lonely, exactly that small, forever. He thought about Sarah, and he didn't feel the guilt he'd braced for. He felt instead, and this surprised him so much, he had to breathe through it, that somewhere she was glad. That wherever she was watching her daughter wrap her arms around a weeping stranger by a duck pond, Sarah Miller was glad. "Daddy," Emma called, still holding on to Olivia. "Come here. Olivia needs a group hug. She's having a hard first day of school." And David walked over across the cold grass, and he knelt down and he put his arms around both of them. His daughter and the woman who buys the milk. Metaphorically, the two of them. The whole unlikely, impossible shape of it. And the three of them stayed like that by the duck pond for a long time, while the ducks, indifferent to the miracle happening on the grass, went on about their business on the gray water. "Okay," Emma announced, finally pulling back and wiping her nose on her sleeve in a way David would normally have corrected and now could not have cared less about. "Group hug's over. Olivia, do you want to feed the ducks? I have bread. You can have some of my bread, but you have to throw it far, or the mean goose gets it all and the mean goose doesn't deserve it." "I would love," Olivia said, wiping her eyes, climbing to her feet, her ruined coat forgotten, "to help you keep bread away from the mean goose. That sounds like the most important thing I've done in years." "It is," Emma said seriously, taking her hand, taking Olivia Harper's hand, like it was nothing. Like it was the most natural thing in the world, and towing her toward the water. "Come on, the good ducks are over here. I'll show you which ones are the good ones. That one's named Gerald. I named him. He has a personality." And David Miller stood by the duck pond in the cold gray morning and watched a billionaire and his 8-year-old daughter crouch side by side at the water's edge, throwing bread and conspiring against a goose. and he understood with a certainty that started somewhere in his chest and spread outward until his whole body ached with it, that his life had just divided cleanly into everything that came before this moment and everything that would come after. He pulled out his phone. He didn't know why. Some instinct told him to keep it this exact second before it became a memory and started to blur. He took a picture. Olivia and Emma, backs to the camera heads, bent together over a slice of bread, a fat duck named Gerald, regarding them with royal disinterest. And then standing alone with his phone in his hands and his family 6 feet away at the water's edge, David Miller did something he had not done in 3 years, not once, not since the night the hospital called. He looked up at the gray sky and he found he was smiling, and he said very quietly, so only the person he was talking to could hear, "You'd have liked her, Sarah. I think you sent her. I don't know how, but I think you did." He wiped his face. "Thank you for not leaving us as alone as I thought." At the water's edge, Emma shrieked with laughter as the mean goose made a run at the bread, and Olivia Harper, worth a number she'd stopped feeling anything about, flung her arms out wide to block the goose's path, laughing harder than David had ever heard her laugh. Laughing like a woman who had just remembered after 20 years what her own laugh sounded like. "Not today, Gerald's nemesis," Olivia shouted at the goose. "Not today." And Emma laughed so hard she sat down in the grass. And David Miller, watching, thought this is what was under the couch. Gerald the duck became over the following weeks a fixture of all their lives. That was how David knew it was real. Not the grand things, but the way a duck named Gerald entered the private vocabulary of 3 people and stayed there. Emma would come home from school with reports. Olivia would text from a boardroom in another city, "How is our son Gerald?" And David would reply, "Gerald is thriving. Gerald bit a toddler today. We are very proud." It became a running joke. A shared language, the small, stupid shorthand of people who belong to each other. And David remembered telling Olivia months ago that it was the small, stupid things that killed you when you lost them. And here they were building small, stupid things on purpose, and it was the opposite of dying. Olivia came to the apartment for the first time on a Sunday. She'd been terrified of it. David could tell from the texts leading up to it, which grew shorter and more clipped, as Sunday approached, the way her language always tightened when she was scared. "What time? Should I bring something? What does one bring? I don't know how to do this." And David had written back, "Bring yourself, that's all. Emma wants to show you her room, and that's a bigger deal than you know." She'd shown up with a bag of groceries because she hadn't been able to help herself, and David had opened the door to find Olivia Harper standing in the hallway of his cramped apartment building, holding a paper bag like a shield. "I panicked," she said. "I bought milk and other things. I didn't know what to bring, so I bought everything. There's a whole rotisserie chicken in here. I don't know why. I saw it and I bought it." "You brought milk," David said. "I brought milk." They looked at each other in the doorway, and neither of them said the thing "I'll buy the milk with you" that night at the cafe metaphorically, but it was there sitting in the paper bag between them, and Olivia's chin trembled, and David reached out and took the bag from her arms, and set it on the floor, and pulled her into the apartment, and into a hug before she could talk herself back out into the hallway. "Hi," he said into her hair. "Hi," she said into his shoulder. "I'm terrified." "I know. There's a child in this apartment who I'm supposed to have a normal Sunday with, and I don't know how normal Sundays work, David. I've never had one. I don't have the software for it." "Olivia." "What?" "She's been asking all morning what time you're getting here. She cleaned her room. She never cleans her room. She put out her good markers for you, the ones she doesn't let anybody use." Olivia pulled back and looked at him, and her eyes were wet. "The good markers?" "The good markers." "Daddy?" Emma's voice came from down the hall. "Is that Olivia? Olivia, did you come? I have something to show you." And Olivia Harper wiped her eyes fast with the back of her hand and squared her shoulders, like a woman walking into the most important meeting of her life, which David thought she was, and called back in a voice that only shook a little. "I'm here. I'm coming. I hear you have good markers." "The good markers." Emma bellowed, delighted, and Olivia laughed and walked down the hall toward the voice, and David stood in his own kitchen with a bag of groceries at his feet, and a rotisserie chicken he didn't need, and had to hold on to the counter for a second because the size of what was happening kept catching him off guard. That Sunday, Olivia sat cross-legged on the floor of an 8-year-old's bedroom and let herself be shown every single object Emma owned, one at a time, with full biographical detail. She learned the names of 11 stuffed animals. She was told in strictest confidence which drawer the really secret things were in. She colored a picture with the good markers badly, Emma informed her. But she was told she'd improve with practice, and Emma taped Olivia's terrible drawing to the wall next to her own in the place of honor. And Olivia looked at her clumsy crayon duck taped to a little girl's wall and had to leave the room for a minute and stand in the bathroom and press a towel to her face. David found her there. "Hey," he said softly from the doorway. "You okay?" "She taped it to the wall," Olivia whispered. "My terrible duck. She taped it up next to her own drawings like it belongs there." "It does belong there. David, I have paintings in my apartment that are insured for more than this entire building." Olivia lowered the towel. Her face was wrecked, mascara gone, and she'd never looked less like the woman from the magazines and more like an actual human being. "And not one of them, not one has ever made me feel the way that crayon duck taped to a wall makes me feel. What is wrong with me? Why is this the thing? Why is a bad crayon drawing the thing that's going to break me?" David came in and took the towel from her hands and set it down and held her face. "Because the paintings you paid for," he said, "the duck she chose. Somebody decided your terrible drawing was good enough to hang next to her own. Nobody can buy that. That's the one thing on earth money can't touch. That's why it breaks you, because you spent 20 years learning that everything has a price and you just found the thing that doesn't." Olivia looked at him for a long moment. "How do you do that?" she said. "Do what?" "Say the exact true thing. Every time. You reach into the middle of me and you name the thing I couldn't name. Nobody's ever done that. I pay people a great deal of money to tell me things, and none of them have ever once told me anything as true as what you just said in a bathroom." David didn't answer. He was aware suddenly and completely of how close they were standing, of his hands still on her face, of the fact that a door had been quietly opening between them for weeks, and they were both right now standing directly in the frame of it. "Daddy," Emma's voice from the hall. "Olivia, are you doing more crying? Because if you're doing more crying, that's okay. But I made a card, and I want to give it to Olivia, and I can't find you." David and Olivia broke apart, both laughing, both wiping their faces, and Olivia called out, "We're not crying. We had something in our eyes, both of us, at the same time. That's what Daddy always says," Emma said skeptically, appearing in the doorway with a folded piece of construction paper. "He always says he has something in his eye. He has the most stuff in his eyes of anybody." She held out the card. "This is for you. I made it. It says welcome, but I ran out of room, so it says Welco, but it means welcome." Olivia took the card. Welco in careful crayon, decorated with what were unmistakably 3 ducks and a lopsided sun, and she held it in both hands the way David had once held a torn menu, like it might come apart if she wasn't careful. "Emma," she said, "this is the nicest thing anyone has ever given me." "It's just a card," Emma said, pleased. "No," Olivia said. "It's the nicest thing anyone has ever given me. I'm going to keep it forever. I'm going to put it," she thought about it, "I'm going to put it on my desk, at work, where I can see it every single day. And when people come into my office and ask about it, I'm going to tell them a girl named Emma made it for me, and that it's worth more than everything else in the building." Emma beamed. Then, business concluded, she said, "Okay, can we have the chicken now?" "I saw the chicken. I've been thinking about the chicken." It should have been able to stay that simple. That was the thing David kept coming back to later. It should have been allowed to just be 3 people and a duck named Gerald and a card that said Welco. But Olivia Harper did not belong only to a duck pond and a cramped apartment. She belonged, whether she liked it or not, to 11,000 employees and a board of directors and a machine of a company that did not care that she had finally, at 41, learned what a normal Sunday felt like. The first crack came on a Thursday. David got to the cafe at 7 and Olivia wasn't there. This had never happened. Not once in 3 months. He sat at their table and told himself it was traffic, told himself it was a meeting running long, and at 7:20 his phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry. I can't come. Something's happening at the company. I can't explain it over text, and I wouldn't understand half of it myself yet. I'm on a call that might not end for hours. I'm so sorry, David. Please tell Emma I said," and then a pause. The 3 dots appearing and disappearing, and then, "Please tell Emma I said the mean goose doesn't win. She'll know what it means." What? David sat alone at the table and felt something cold move through him, and he recognized it, and he hated that he recognized it. It was the old fear. The one he'd carried for 3 years. The one that said, "See, this is what happens. You let somebody in, and then one Thursday, the chair is empty, and it's empty forever." He typed back, "It's okay. Take care of your company. We'll be here." And then he sat with the lie of it's okay for a while because it wasn't okay. Not because Olivia had missed one dinner, but because of the 8-year-old at home who was going to ask where Olivia was, and David was going to have to decide right now what kind of father he was going to be about it. He could protect Emma. He could say Olivia was busy, keep it vague. Start the slow, careful process of easing Olivia back out of their lives before Emma got any more attached, before it became the thing he'd sworn he'd never let happen. It would be the safe thing. It would be the David from 3 months ago thing. Instead, he called her. "Olivia?" "David. I really can't talk. I know. 10 seconds. I'm not calling about dinner." He gripped the phone. "I'm calling because I need to know something, and I need you to be honest, because I've got a kid at home who's going to ask about you. Are you okay? Not the company. You. Whatever's happening, are you okay?" There was a silence on the line. When Olivia spoke again, her voice had changed, the crisp executive gone something rawer underneath. "No," she said. "No, I'm not okay. Somebody on my board is trying to push me out, David, quietly. They've been building it for months, and I didn't see it because I was a breath. Because I was distracted. Because I was at a cafe every Thursday and a duck pond every Sunday, and I took my eye off the thing I built my whole life around, and now there's a man named Preston Vale who's got half the board convinced I've lost my edge. And the phrase he keeps using..." Her voice tightened. "The phrase he keeps using is that I've become emotionally compromised." David closed his eyes. "They think," Olivia said, and now there was a terrible flatness to her voice, "that I've gone soft. That's the word. Soft. And the horrible thing, David, the thing I can't stop thinking is, what if they're right? What if letting you in, letting her in, what if it did cost me my edge? What if you can't have both? What if I have to choose between us and the company?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Another silence. In the background, David could hear voices, people waiting for her, a whole world pulling at her. "I have to go," Olivia said. "There are people I have to go. David, I'm sorry." "Olivia, before you go, one thing." "What?" "You said you don't know if you can have both." David's voice was steady, even though his heart wasn't. "I want you to hear me. If it ever really comes down to it, if it's ever really us or the company, and you have to choose, and you choose the company..." He swallowed. "I'll understand. I mean that. You built that thing to make sure nobody you loved ever went hungry. That's not nothing. That's the most love I've ever heard packed into a company. So if you choose it, I won't hate you. But I need you to know, that's not the choice I'm hoping you make. Because Emma taped your terrible duck to her wall, and you can't untape that. It's already done. She already chose you, and so did I." He heard her breathing on the other end of the line. "That's not fair," Olivia whispered. "Saying that, now, when I have to walk into a room and be made of steel in about 90 seconds. "I know," David said. But you needed to hear it before you walked in, not after. Why? Because a woman walking into a fight is stronger when she knows exactly what she's fighting for. You go in there thinking about your edge, you'll lose because edge is just a word. You go in there thinking about a card that says, Welco on your desk. He heard her breath catch. That they can't beat. That's not soft, Olivia. That's the hardest thing in the world. Now go. Go win. And come feed the ducks on Sunday. There was a long pause. The mean goose doesn't win, Olivia said finally, and there was steel in it now, but it was a different kind of steel than she'd walked in with. The mean goose doesn't win. David agreed. She hung up. And David sat alone at their table in the cafe, and for the first time in 3 years, the empty chair across from him did not feel like a verdict. It felt like a chair that someone was coming back to. He told Emma the truth. He'd decided somewhere between the cafe and home that he was done managing his daughter's heart like it was made of glass. She'd surprised him at the duck pond. She'd surprised him with the card. He was slowly understanding more capable of love and loss than he'd given her credit for, more capable maybe than he was. Olivia couldn't come to dinner tonight, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed, and she might not be able to come to some things for a little while. There's a problem at her work. Some people there are being unfair to her, and she has to fight them, and it's going to take a lot of her time. Emma's face did something careful. Is she going to disappear? And there it was. The question underneath every question this child had ever asked him. David took her hands. Here's what I know, he said. I don't know how the fight at her work is going to go. I can't promise you that. Grown-up problems are complicated, and sometimes they don't go the way we want. But I can promise you one thing, and I'm only going to promise you things I know are true, because you deserve that. Okay. Emma nodded. Olivia is not going to disappear on purpose, David said. The way, he chose the words with enormous care. The way Mom didn't disappear on purpose. Mom didn't want to leave us, baby. She got sick, and sometimes sickness is stronger than everybody, but she didn't choose it. She fought it as hard as anybody has ever fought anything because she didn't want to leave you. You know that, right? You know Mom fought to stay. Emma's eyes filled. Grandma said Mom asked about me. At the end, she asked if I ate breakfast. David hadn't known that. It knocked the wind out of him. She did. Grandma told me. She said the last thing Mom asked was, did Emma eat breakfast? Emma wiped her nose. So I always eat breakfast now, even when I'm not hungry, because Mom wanted me to. And David Miller had to put his hand over his mouth and breathe. Because 3 years in, his daughter had been carrying that all by herself, eating breakfast every morning for a dead mother who'd used one of her last breaths to ask if her little girl was fed. Emma, he managed. Come here. She climbed into his lap the way she did on the bad nights, and he held her, and he understood that he'd had it backwards this whole time. He'd thought he was protecting her, keeping the world small to keep her safe, when the truth was that this 8-year-old had been quietly braver about love and loss than he'd been for 3 straight years. Olivia's not sick, he said into her hair. That's the difference. Her problem is people being unfair, and unfair problems can be won. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to worry about whether she disappears. We're going to help her win. You know how you help somebody win a hard fight. How? You remind them what they're fighting for. David pulled back and looked at his daughter. You make them something, so they've got a reason to come back. Emma's face lit up, tears and all. I could make her another card. You could make her another card. I could make her a card that says the mean goose doesn't win. David laughed, wet and helpless. Baby, I think that's exactly the card she needs. Olivia won the first round. She texted David at 11 that night, survived the meeting. Vale didn't get his vote, but he'll be back. He's playing a long game, and he's good at it, and I've got maybe a few weeks before the next move. But I'm still CEO tonight. Tell Emma the goose lost round 1. David wrote back. Emma made you a card. It's on the fridge waiting for you. It says the mean goose doesn't win. She spelled goose with 2 extra O's. Goose. She said it needed to be a bigger goose. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a long time. Then, a bigger goose. I'm sitting in my office at midnight and I just laughed out loud alone, and the cleaning staff looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Which 3 months ago I had. Thank you. Both of you. I mean it. Sunday. Ducks. I'll be there if I have to walk out of a board meeting to do it. She was there Sunday. And the Sunday after. But David could see the toll it was taking, could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way she checked her phone more than she used to, the way certain calls made her go still and gray. Preston Vale. She explained one afternoon while Emma ran ahead to the ducks, a man who understood exactly one thing about the world. Leverage, Olivia said. He understands leverage, and he's figured out that I have something now that I didn't have a year ago. What's that? Something to lose. She watched Emma crouch at the water's edge. For 20 years, I was untouchable, David, because there was nothing you could take from me that I cared about. You can't threaten a person who doesn't love anything. But now? She gestured at the little girl by the pond. Now I love something. 2 somethings. And Vale can smell it. He knows that a year ago I'd have crushed him without blinking, and now I hesitate, because I keep thinking about Sunday, about the ducks, about whether winning this war is worth what it's costing the good parts of my life. And that hesitation is the crack he's driving the wedge into. So what do you do? Olivia was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet, she said. I honestly don't. For the first time in my life, I don't know what I want more, to win the thing I spent my whole life building, or to protect the thing I found by accident in a cafe 3 months ago. She looked at him. You did this to me, you know. I was perfectly efficiently miserable before you. I had no weaknesses. And then you had to go and hold my hand, and let me hear your dead wife say your name. And now I'm a woman who leaves board meetings early to feed ducks. And I can't tell if you saved my life or ruined it. Can't it be both? Olivia laughed, surprised. God. Maybe. Maybe that's what saving somebody actually is. Ruining the version of them that was surviving, so the version that could actually live has room to show up. At the water's edge, Emma shouted, Gerald had babies. Olivia. Daddy Gerald is a mom, there's little ones. And Olivia Harper, worth a number, hunted by a man named Vale, hanging onto an empire by her fingernails, forgot every single bit of it in an instant, and actually ran down to the water's edge to see the ducklings, and David watched her go, and thought about how 3 months ago she'd told him she couldn't remember the last time someone touched her hand without wanting something. And here she was sprinting across wet grass to look at baby ducks with a child who wanted nothing from her at all, except her company. He walked down to join them. Emma was on her knees in the mud, not caring, pointing. Olivia was crouched beside her, not caring about her $1,000 slacks, pointing too. There's 5, Emma breathed. Olivia, there's 5 babies. Gerald's a whole family now. Gerald's a whole family now. Olivia repeated softly, and she wasn't looking at the ducks anymore. She was looking at the little girl beside her, and then up at David standing over them, and something moved across her face, some decision, or the beginning of one forming in real time. David, she said. Yeah. When this is over, the company thing, however it goes. She stood up, mud on her knees, 5 ducklings paddling behind an indifferent Gerald on the gray water. I want to talk to you about something. Not now. Now's for the ducks. But soon. There's something I've been thinking about for weeks, and I need to say it out loud to you, and I need to say it when I'm not exhausted and scared, because it deserves better than that. Okay. David's heart was doing the dangerous thing again. Okay, he said. Whenever you're ready. It might change some things, Olivia said. For all of us. It's a big thing. Olivia. David reached out and in front of his daughter in the gray afternoon light by the duck pond took her hand, her muddy hand, her CEO hand, her terrified, brilliant hand. Whatever it is, we'll be here. That's the whole thing. That's the only promise that matters. Whatever you need to say, whenever you're ready to say it. We're not going anywhere. Emma looked up from the ducklings at the 2 grown-ups holding hands over her head, and she didn't say anything, but a small, satisfied smile crossed her face. the smile of a child who has quietly known something for a while and is pleased to see the adults finally catching up. Then she went back to the ducks, because she was 8, and there were 5 babies, and the babies were more important than anything the grown-ups could possibly be doing. And the 3 of them stayed at the water's edge until the light started to go, watching a duck named Gerald teach 5 small ducklings how to swim, none of them saying much, all of them for one more Sunday before whatever was coming came exactly where they belonged. The big thing Olivia wanted to say had to wait because Preston Vale made his move first. It came on a Tuesday, and it came ugly. David was at his desk at work when his phone lit up with a news alert of all things, a business headline from a publication he'd never read in his life, pushed to his phone because he'd started weeks ago following Olivia's company without telling her. The headline made his stomach drop. Harper faces board revolt, sources say CEO, distracted, diminished. He read it standing at his desk with his heart pounding. It was a hit piece clearly planted anonymous sources aboard, increasingly concerned, a CEO who had stepped back from the aggressive posture that built the company. And then buried in the 4th paragraph, the thing that made David's blood go cold, a line about how Harper had reportedly been spending significant time on personal matters, including a relationship with a widowed office worker and his young daughter. They'd found them. Vale had found them. He'd taken the one true good thing in Olivia's life and turned it into ammunition, into evidence of her weakness, into proof for a boardroom full of men that she'd gone soft. David called her. It went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He texted, "I saw the article. Are you okay? Call me the second you can. I don't care about the part about me. I care about you." Nothing for 3 hours. David couldn't work. He picked Emma up from school and made her dinner on autopilot and answered her questions about her day without hearing them. And it was Emma again who saw through him. "You've got the something in your eye face," she said, but sad this time. "Is it Olivia? Is the goose winning?" "The goose is fighting Dirty Baby," David said. "But Olivia's tough. Tougher than any goose." At 9, after Emma was asleep, his phone finally rang. "David?" Olivia's voice was flat, scraped, raw. "I'm sorry. I've been in a room with lawyers since noon." "Are you okay?" "No." A long breath. "They put you in the article. You and Emma." "I never, David. I swear to you I never told anyone. Not one person knows about the cafe, about the pond, about the apartment." "But Vale had me followed. He had a man follow me to a park and photograph me feeding ducks with a child. And he handed those photographs to a reporter as evidence that I've lost my mind." Her voice shook with a fury David had never heard from her. "He used Emma. He used an 8-year-old girl feeding ducks as a weapon against me in a boardroom. And I will never—" She stopped, steadied herself. "I am going to destroy him for that. I want you to know that. Whatever else happens, that man is going to learn what I was like before I went soft. Olivia?" David kept his voice calm because one of them had to be. "Listen to me. First, Emma's fine. She's asleep. She has no idea any of this exists. She's not hurt. But she could be. If this gets bigger. If they— We'll handle that. Together. That's not what I need you to focus on right now." David gripped the phone. "What I need to know is, what does the article actually change legally? With the board? Is this the thing that pushes you out?" Silence. "Olivia." "There's a vote," she said quietly. "In 8 days, Vale forced it. It's a vote of confidence, a referendum on whether I keep control of the company I built. And the article was designed to swing the 3 or 4 board members who were still undecided. It's a good play, David. I hate it, but it's a good play. He's telling them a story they're primed to believe, that the great Olivia Harper met a sad widower and a cute kid and went soft, and a soft CEO is a liability, and they should protect their investment by handing control to a man who still has his edge." She laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "The worst part is that the story's compelling because it's half true. I did change. I did take my eye off the ball. I did start caring about duck ponds more than acquisitions. So how do I stand up in front of that board and tell them the story's wrong, when I'm not even sure it is. David was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you what I think? Please. I've had lawyers talking at me for 9 hours. I would like to hear something from a person who loves me. The word landed between them, loves me, the first time either of them had said it spoken plainly into a phone at 9 o'clock at night in the middle of a war. Neither of them acknowledged it. Both of them heard it, I think. David said carefully, "You're asking the wrong question. You keep asking how to convince the board you haven't changed. But you did change. You said it yourself, I ruined the version of you that was surviving, so the version that could actually live had room to show up. That's real. That happened. You can't unhappen it, and you shouldn't want to." He took a breath. So maybe the answer isn't to convince them you're the same. Maybe the answer is to decide whether you even want to be the CEO of a company that thinks caring about people is a weakness. David, that company is my entire... I know what it is. It's the thing you built so nobody you loved would ever go hungry. I'm not telling you to throw it away. I would never tell you that. David closed his eyes. I'm telling you that the reason you built it doesn't exist anymore. Your mother's gone. You built a fortress to protect people you loved, and by the time it was finished, there was nobody inside it. And now, finally, there are people inside it. Again me, Emma. God help us, a duck named Gerald in Vale's whole play only works because he assumes the company matters more to you than the people. He's betting everything on the version of you from a year ago. So the question isn't, how do you convince the board you're still that woman? The question is, are you? The line was silent for a long, long time. David could hear her breathing. I have to go, Olivia said finally, and her voice was different, not defeated, but something quieter and deeper, like a person who'd just been handed a key and was turning it over in her hands, deciding whether to use it. I have to think. David, you just said the thing again. The true thing I couldn't say. I have 8 days to figure out what I want, and you just told me I already know. I just have to be brave enough to admit it. Whatever you decide, David said. We're here. I know, Olivia said. That's the whole problem, and the whole answer. Good night, David. Good night. She hung up, and David sat in his dark kitchen for a long time, thinking about a word neither of them had acknowledged, and about a vote in 8 days that was going to decide the shape of all their lives. The 8 days were the longest of David's life. Olivia went underground. Not from him, she texted. She called when she could, brief and exhausted. But from the world, disappearing into a war. He couldn't see and couldn't fight. A war fought in phone calls and legal filings and quiet conversations with board members whose loyalty could still be turned. She missed Thursday dinner. She missed Sunday ducks, and David had to tell Emma, and Emma took it better than he did. She's fighting the goose, Emma said solemnly. You can't feed ducks when you're fighting the goose. That's just science. That's just science, David agreed, and hugged his daughter and marveled at her. But he could hear it wearing on Olivia. Each call she sounded thinner further away, and on the 6th day, something in her voice frightened him. I've been thinking, she said, that maybe the smart thing is to give Vale what he wants. David sat up. What? Not the company, not control, but you, us. Maybe the smart play is to make the story go away. If I very publicly step back from the personal matters, if I make it clear I'm all business again, I take the wind out of his sails. The whole narrative is that I've gone soft over a widower and his kid. So if the widower and his kid aren't in the picture anymore. Olivia? David's voice came out harder than he'd ever used with her. Stop, right now. Do not finish that sentence. David, I'm trying to protect... You're trying to protect the company by throwing away the reason the company ever mattered. David was on his feet now, pacing his small kitchen. Listen to yourself. You're about to make the exact choice that proves Vale right. He's telling the board that the company matters more to you than people. And your plan is to prove it by cutting out the people to save the company. That's not beating him, Olivia. That's letting him win and calling it a victory. I'm scared, Olivia said, and her voice broke. David, I'm terrified. I've never lost anything I couldn't afford to lose. And now, there's a version of the next 8 days where I lose the company and you and Emma all at once. And I end up with nothing right back where I started alone in a penthouse. And at least if I cut you loose, I control it. At least it's my choice. At least I don't have to watch it get taken from me. And David finally understood. This wasn't strategy. This was the oldest fear in the world, the same one he'd carried for 3 years, the same one Emma carried. The fear that had a stranglehold on every person who'd ever loved something and lost it. If I leave first, it can't leave me. If I burn it down myself, no one can take it. Oh, Olivia, he said, and all the hardness went out of his voice. You're doing the thing I did for 3 years. You'd rather have nothing on purpose than risk having everything and losing it by accident. Silence on the line. Then small, how do you stop? You don't cut us loose to protect yourself from losing us, David said gently. That's not protection. That's just losing us early to avoid the suspense. I know because I almost did it to you. The night of that first article I sat in my kitchen and I thought I'll ease her out. I'll protect Emma. I'll end it before it can end itself. And I didn't. You know why? Why? Because Emma taped your terrible duck to her wall. And I realized that protecting her from ever losing you meant making sure she never got to have you. And that's not protection. That's just a slower kind of loss. David's voice was thick. So no, you don't get to cut us loose to feel safe. We already chose you. You're stuck with us. Now you go into that boardroom in 2 days and you fight for the company. If you want it, fight like hell. But you do it as the woman you actually are now. Not the woman Vale needs you to pretend to be. And whatever happens with the vote, you come feed the ducks on Sunday. Because we'll be there. Win or lose, company or no company. We'll be at the pond. He heard her crying quietly, the way she'd cried the first night in the cafe, letting it fall instead of hiding it. I don't deserve you to, she said. That's not how it works, David said. Nobody deserves anybody. You just get lucky, and then you don't let go. That's the whole secret. That's the thing nobody tells you. The vote was on a Thursday. The symmetry of it wasn't lost on David that the day their whole thing had started, the day of a torn menu and an empty chair, was now the day Olivia's fate would be decided in a boardroom across town. He couldn't be there. He couldn't do anything. He took the day off work because he knew he'd be useless, and he sat in his apartment and stared at his phone and waited. Emma was at school. He'd almost kept her home wanting the company, but he'd made her go because normal was the thing he could give her, and he clung to it. He texted Olivia at 9 before the meeting. Whatever happens in that room today, you already won the thing that matters. You have people who love you. Vale doesn't. He can take a company. He can't take that. Go be exactly who you are. We're proud of you. Both of us. The mean goose doesn't win. She wrote back one line, I'm walking in now. Thank you for teaching me what I was fighting for. And then nothing. The morning crawled. David cleaned the whole apartment. He reorganized a closet. He made a lunch he didn't eat. At noon, nothing. At 1, nothing. He picked Emma up at 3 with his phone clutched in his hand, and still nothing. And Emma took one look at his face and slipped her hand into his without a word, and they walked home together in silence, an 8-year-old holding her father up. At 4:30, his phone rang. David nearly dropped it. Olivia. It's done. Her voice was unreadable, flat, wrung out. David's heart stopped. What happened? Did you? I need to tell you in person, Olivia said. Both of you. Can I come over? Olivia, please just tell me if you're... I'm coming over, she said. 20 minutes. I need to say this to your faces, both of you. Is Emma there? She's here. Keep her there. I'm coming. And she hung up, and David stood in his kitchen with no idea whether the woman he loved had just won her life's work or lost it, whether she was coming to celebrate or to grieve, and the 20 minutes that followed stretched longer than the 8 days before them. When the knock came, Emma got to the door first. "Olivia!" she shouted, flinging it open and threw her arms around Olivia's waist before David could see her face, before he could read what the day had done to her. And when Olivia knelt down to hug Emma back, and then looked up at David over the little girl's shoulder, he still couldn't read it. Her eyes were red. Her makeup was gone. She looked like a woman who'd been through a war, but there was something in her face he couldn't name, something quiet and enormous and settled. "Hi," she said. "Hi," David managed. "Olivia, please. I've been dying all day. What happened?" Olivia stood, keeping one hand on Emma's shoulder, and she looked at David across the small apartment, and she said, "I want to tell you a story. Both of you. Emma, come sit with your dad. This is a grown-up story, but it's got a duck in it, so I think you'll like it." They sat on the couch, Emma between them, and Olivia sat on the coffee table facing them close, her knees almost touching theirs. "There was a woman," Olivia began, "who built a castle. A huge, tall, strong castle with walls so thick nothing could ever get in. And she built it because when she was a little girl, she'd been cold and hungry, and she promised herself she'd never be cold and hungry again, and neither would anyone she loved." She looked at Emma. "But here's the sad part. By the time the castle was finished, the woman was so busy building it that everyone she loved had gone away, and she ended up all alone in the biggest, strongest, emptiest castle in the whole world." Emma was rapt. "That's so sad." "It is sad," Olivia agreed. "But it's not the end, because one day the woman got stood up at a cafe." David's breath caught. "And she saw a man sitting alone." Olivia went on, her eyes on David now, eating dinner by himself with a torn-up menu, refusing to leave, even though someone had heard him. "And she walked over, and she sat down. And that man and his daughter and a duck named Gerald," Emma giggled, "they did something to the woman that no one had ever done. They didn't try to get into her castle. They just stood outside the walls and waited, and they were kind, and eventually the woman realized something." Olivia's voice thickened. She realized she didn't need the castle anymore. She'd built it to protect the people she loved. But the people she loved were standing outside it in a park feeding ducks. And you can't feed ducks from inside a castle. So the woman had a choice. Keep the castle and stay safe and stay alone. Or leave the castle, Emma whispered. "Or leave the castle," Olivia said. David's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear. "Olivia, what did you do? In the boardroom. What did you do?" Olivia looked at him, and slowly a smile spread across her face. A real one, the kind he'd only seen a handful of times, the kind that made her look years younger and pounds lighter. "I walked into that room," she said, and Preston Vale had his whole speech ready. He had the article. He had the photos of me feeding ducks. He had 11,000 reasons why I'd gone soft and needed to be replaced. And he stood up and he started his presentation. "And do you know what I did?" "What?" David breathed. "I stopped him. I stood up and I told the whole board that Preston Vale was right." Olivia's smile widened at David's shocked face. "I told them I had changed. I told them that a year ago I'd have crushed a man like Vale without a thought, and that I couldn't do that anymore because somewhere in the last few months I'd remembered that I was a person and not a weapon. And I told them that a company run by a person instead of a weapon was going to make different choices. Slower ones, kinder ones, ones that took 11,000 employees' actual lives into account. And I said if that wasn't the company they wanted, then they should vote me out, and I'd walk away that afternoon and never look back, because I'd finally found something worth more than the castle." David couldn't speak. "And then," Olivia said, "I told them about a girl who taped my terrible drawing of a duck next to her own drawings on her bedroom wall. In a room full of men in suits, worth more than cars. I told them about a card that says, Welco. I told them that the photos Vale took, the ones that were supposed to prove I'd lost my edge, were the proudest photographs anyone had ever taken of me, and that if caring about a child feeding ducks made me unfit to run a company, then they'd built the wrong company." Her eyes were shining. "And I put it to a vote. Not Vale's vote. Mine. I said vote for the woman I was, and I'll leave right now, and you can have Preston Vale and his edge. Or vote for the woman I've become, and we'll build something different. Something with a soul. Your choice." The apartment was dead silent. Even Emma was holding her breath. "And," David whispered. Olivia reached out and took his hand, and she took Emma's hand, and she held them both. "They voted for the woman I've become," she said, and her voice finally broke the tears coming freely now. 7-4. Preston Vale is gone. The board asked for his resignation, not mine. I kept the company, David. I kept it. But I kept it by telling the truth about who I am now, instead of pretending to be who I used to be. I walked in ready to lose everything to keep you two. And instead, I got to keep all of it. The company and the ducks. I didn't have to choose." She was laughing and crying at once. "You told me weeks ago that maybe you'd both saved my life and ruined it. You were right. You ruined the woman who could have crushed Preston Vale. And that ruined woman just won the biggest fight of her life by refusing to be crushing. Do you understand what you did? Do you understand what the two of you did to me?" David couldn't answer. He was crying too. He reached across his daughter and pulled Olivia into them, all three of them tangled together on a second-hand couch in a cramped apartment, and Emma, squished happily in the middle, said in a muffled voice, "Does this mean Olivia won the goose fight?" And Olivia laughed through her tears and pressed a kiss to the top of Emma's head and said, "Yes, baby, Olivia won the goose fight. The mean goose is gone, forever." "Good," Emma declared with enormous satisfaction. "He was a jerk. Can we get pizza to celebrate?" "We can get all the pizza in the world," Olivia said. And then she pulled back and wiped her face and looked at David with an expression that suddenly turned nervous, the same nervous he'd seen at the duck pond, the same terrified brave he'd learned to love. "David," she said, "the big thing. The thing I said I wanted to tell you. Weeks ago, at the pond. I said it deserved to be said when I wasn't exhausted and scared." She laughed shakily. "Well, I'm exhausted and I'm scared. So this is clearly the perfect moment. Because if I wait for a moment when I'm not scared, I'll be waiting forever, and I've wasted enough time being safe." David went very still. Emma looked back and forth between them with wide eyes. "I love you," Olivia said. "Both of you. Not the way I love the company. The other way. The real way. The way where I'd trade the whole castle for one more Sunday at the pond." Her voice trembled. "I've been trying to find a way to ask you something for weeks, and I keep losing my nerve, so I'm just going to say it badly right now in your kitchen with pizza still unordered." She took a breath. "I don't want to just be the person who shows up on Thursdays and Sundays anymore. I want David. I want to be family. I want to do this for real. I want to buy the milk with you. Not metaphorically, actually, literally, for the rest of my life. If you'll have me, if Emma will have me." And before David could find his voice, before he could form a single word around the enormous thing swelling in his chest, Emma, 8 years old, who had known this was coming, long before either grown-up had launched herself off the couch and into Olivia's arms, and shouted the answer for both of them. "Yes! Yes! 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 Daddy! Say yes! Say yes!" And David Miller, who 3 months ago had torn a menu in half in an empty cafe and been certain he'd be lonely for the rest of his life, looked at the woman holding his daughter and finally found the only word that mattered. "Yes," he said. "God, yes. Of course, yes." The pizza that night was by unanimous agreement the best pizza any of them had ever eaten, though David suspected it had less to do with the pizza and more to do with the fact that all three of them kept stopping mid-bite to look at each other like they couldn't quite believe the others were real. Emma ate 3 slices and talked the entire time, laying out with the seriousness of a general planning a campaign, all the things they were going to do now that Olivia was official. "You have to come to my school play," she informed Olivia. "It's in the spring. I'm a tree. I don't have any lines because trees don't talk, but I have a very important part because I'm in the background of the whole thing, and if I mess up, everyone will see. Daddy's coming and Grandma's coming, and now you have to come too." "I will be there," Olivia said, "in the front row with a camera embarrassing you completely." "That's what family does," Emma said matter-of-factly, and then, having said the word without thinking about it, she froze with a slice of pizza halfway to her mouth and looked up at Olivia to see if she'd said something wrong. Olivia had gone very still. "Is that?" Emma said carefully. "Is it okay that I said that? That you're family now because you said family, so I thought..." "It's more than okay," Olivia said, and her voice was thick. "It's the best thing anyone's ever called me. You can call me family as many times as you want. In fact, I'd like it very much if you'd call me family a lot. I have 20 years to make up for." Emma nodded, satisfied, and went back to her pizza, and David watched Olivia Harper, who that very afternoon had stared down a boardroom and kept an empire, come completely undone over one word from an 8-year-old, and he understood that this was the shape of the rest of his life, and he wanted it more than he'd ever wanted anything. Later, after Emma had finally reluctantly gone to bed, but not before making Olivia promise 3 separate times that she'd still be there in the morning, that she wasn't going to disappear in the night, that this wasn't a dream Emma was going to wake up from. David and Olivia sat together on the couch in the quiet, and for a while, neither of them said anything at all. "She asked me to promise I'd be there in the morning," Olivia said finally softly. 3 times. "I heard. That's the fear, isn't it? The one you told me about the first night. She's still waiting for the person who shows up to disappear." Olivia stared at her hands. "I don't ever want her to have to ask that again, David. I want her to reach a point where it doesn't even occur to her to wonder if I'll be there in the morning. Where it's just assumed, the way you assume the sun." "That takes time," David said. "You can't promise it into being. You can only prove it one morning at a time until one day she stops counting." "Then I'll prove it every morning for the rest of my life," Olivia said. "Starting tomorrow, I'll be here when she wakes up, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. However many mornings it takes until she stops asking." And she was. That was the thing about Olivia Harper. The thing Preston Vale had fatally underestimated when she decided on something. She did not waver. She was there in the morning in David's kitchen, badly attempting to make pancakes, when Emma padded out in her pajamas and stopped in the doorway and stared. "You're still here," Emma said. "I'm still here," Olivia confirmed. "I'm making pancakes. They're going terribly. I've run companies, but I cannot make a pancake. Come help me before I burn your kitchen down." And Emma broke into a grin that David would remember for the rest of his life, and ran to help, and the two of them stood at the stove making terrible pancakes together, while David leaned in the doorway and watched, and the morning light came through the window, and it was, he thought, the most ordinary miracle he had ever seen. They did it slowly. That was the promise they'd made each other the night of the pizza, that whatever this became, they'd let Emma set the pace. Olivia had read the books. She knew you didn't rush a grieving child, didn't force a place, didn't try to fill a space that wasn't yours to fill. So Olivia never once tried to be Emma's mother. That was, David came to understand, the wisest and most loving thing she could have done. She didn't ask Emma to call her mom. She didn't try to slide into Sarah's place at the table, or in the family photos, or in the bedtime routine. When Emma talked about her mother, and she did more and more as the fear of forgetting Sarah loosened its grip, Olivia listened with her whole heart and never once made it about herself. "Tell me about her," Olivia said one evening months in, when Emma mentioned that her mom used to sing a certain song. What was the song? And Emma sang it, this little wandering half-remembered tune, and Olivia listened, and when Emma finished, Olivia said, "Your mom had beautiful taste. That's a beautiful song. Will you teach it to me? So that when you're grown up and busy and don't have time for us old people, I can still sing your mom's song and think of you both." And Emma, delighted, taught her, and after that, it became a thing. They did. Emma's mother's song sung by Emma and the woman who was carefully, patiently, never trying to replace her. David heard them singing it in the kitchen one night, Sarah's song in Emma's voice, and Olivia's, and he had to go stand in the other room for a while, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because somehow, impossibly, Olivia had found a way to keep Sarah in the house, to make room for the dead woman, instead of papering over her. And David had not known until he heard his daughter teaching his lost wife's song to the woman he loved that this was the thing he'd needed most of all. "You keep her alive," David told Olivia that night. "Sarah, you could have a lot of people would want the dead wife to fade, would find it easier. You do the opposite. You pull her closer." "Of course I do," Olivia said like it was obvious. "She's Emma's mother. She's half of who Emma is. How could I love Emma and not love the woman who made her?" She paused. "And besides, Sarah's the reason you are who you are. The man who apologizes to furniture. The man who ironed a shirt for 45 minutes. She made you into the man I sat down across from in that cafe. I owe her everything. The least I can do is learn her song." David pulled her close and didn't trust himself to speak. "Carwag." Olivia kept the company, but she changed it exactly as she'd promised the board she would. The foundation was Emma's idea in a way. It happened at dinner one night, maybe 6 months in, when Emma, who absorbed everything, who missed nothing, asked Olivia why she had so much money. "Emma," David said, "that's not a—" "No, it's a good question," Olivia said. "I have a lot of money because I built a company that a lot of people use, and when a lot of people use something, it makes money." She considered Emma. "Why do you ask?" "Because," Emma said with the ruthless logic of childhood, "when Mommy died, Daddy said we almost couldn't pay for stuff. He didn't think I heard, but I heard. He was scared about money. And you have so much money, you don't even know what to do with it. That doesn't seem fair. There should be a way to give the extra to the daddies who are scared." The table went quiet. David looked at his daughter, this 8-year-old, now 9, who had heard him crying over bills in the night 3 years ago, and had carried it silently the way she carried everything, and had just laid it on the table with the devastating clarity that only children possess. Olivia set down her fork. "Emma," she said slowly, "how would you feel if that was exactly what we did?" And that was how the Sarah Miller Foundation began, named at Olivia's insistence, for a woman she'd never met over David's protests. That it was too much that Olivia didn't have to do that. "I'm not naming it for me," Olivia said. "I'm not naming it for the company. I'm naming it for the woman who fought as hard as anyone ever fought to stay with her daughter and lost. And I'm naming it for every parent facing that same fight right now, terrified about money on top of everything else. Sarah couldn't be saved. But maybe because of her, some other kid gets to keep their dad a little longer. Maybe some other scared father doesn't have to iron his shirt for 45 minutes wondering if he can afford the electricity bill. That's what the foundation is for. Struggling single parents. The ones the world leaves behind. The ones nobody sits down across from. The foundation helped single parents, the ones drowning quietly. The ones one emergency away from disaster. The ones who, like David 3 years ago, were doing everything right and still barely keeping their heads above water. It paid medical bills. It covered rent during the impossible months. It set up college funds for kids who'd lost a parent. And it did it at Olivia's specific direction, without the paperwork mazes and the humiliating hoops that usually made asking for help feel like a punishment. "When you're drowning," Olivia said, "the last thing you need is a form. You need a hand. So we give them a hand first and ask questions later. That's the whole model. Vale would have hated it. It's wildly inefficient. It's the best thing I've ever built." She poured herself into it in a way she'd never poured into the company. The company had been about protecting people from a distance behind walls. But the foundation put her in rooms with actual struggling parents, and David watched it change. Her watched the last of the castle come down. Watched the woman who'd told him she couldn't remember the last time someone touched her hand, without wanting something become a woman, who spent her days reaching out to touch the hands of strangers who wanted nothing but not to drown. "I found my thing," she told David one night, exhausted and glowing after a long day at the foundation. 20 years I ran a company, and I never once felt what I felt today. A woman cried in my office. Single mom, 3 kids, husband walked out about to lose her apartment. And I handed her a check, and she looked at me like David. She looked at me the way Emma looked at me when she taped up the duck, like I'd given her something that couldn't be bought. Olivia shook her head. I spent my whole life thinking the point was to build the biggest castle. Turns out the point was to tear down the walls and let people in. You knew that. You knew it the whole time. You've been living it for 3 years raising Emma, and you didn't even know it made you rich. They married in the spring in the park by the duck pond. It was Emma's condition, actually. She'd agreed to the whole thing enthusiastically, but had exactly one non-negotiable demand, which was that Gerald had to be there. So, they got married by the duck pond on a bright cold morning, just family and a few friends with a duck named Gerald, and his now half-grown ducklings paddling obliviously on the water 20 feet away. And Emma stood between them in a dress she'd picked herself, and held both their hands and refused to let go, even during the vows, which was fine, because the vows were as much to her as to each other. "I promise," Olivia said, and she was crying, and she'd stopped being embarrassed about crying a long time ago, "to be there in the morning. Every morning. However many mornings it takes until you stop wondering if I will be. I promise to learn your mother's songs and keep her in this family forever. I promise to never once try to take her place and to always, always make room for her." She knelt down to Emma's level. "And I promise you, Emma Miller, that I am not going anywhere. Not on purpose. Not ever. The mean goose doesn't win. You hear me? Not in our family. In our family, the people who love each other stay." And Emma, 9 years old, who 3 years ago had learned that people leave who had eaten breakfast every morning for a dead mother who had asked 100 times if the person would disappear. Emma looked up at Olivia and said, clear and certain and unafraid, "I know. I stopped wondering a while ago. And that not the vows, not the rings, not the paperwork. That was the moment David Miller knew it was real. His daughter had stopped wondering. The fear that had lived in her since she was 5. The fear he'd built his whole small, careful life around trying to protect her from was gone. Not because he'd kept the world away. Because someone had walked toward them and stayed long enough to prove that staying was possible. He thought about Sarah then, the way he always did in the moments that mattered. But it didn't hurt the way it used to. He looked at the duck pond and the bright cold sky and his daughter's hand in his and Olivia's hand in his other, and he thought, you'd be glad, Sarah. I know you would. She's happy. She eats her breakfast. She stopped wondering if people leave. We kept her safe, not by hiding, but by loving. You'd be so glad." And for just a moment, in the wind coming off the water, David could have sworn he felt something like a hand on his shoulder, warm and passing and gone, and he understood it for what it was. Not a ghost, not a miracle, just the simple truth that love doesn't leave when a person does. It stays. It changes shape. It shows up as a song sung in a kitchen, as breakfast eaten faithfully every morning, as the strength to sit down at a table with a stranger. Sarah hadn't left them as alone as he'd feared. She never would.
Mediation.
The years went on the way years do. Emma grew up. The marine biologist phase gave way to the astronaut phase, which gave way eventually to a genuine lasting passion for medicine. Inspired, she said, by her mother, by the doctors who'd fought for Sarah even when they couldn't win, and by Olivia's foundation, by watching what it looked like to spend your life pulling people out of the water. She'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework, then harder homework, then college applications, and Olivia would sit across from her, and the two of them would work in comfortable silence, and David would watch from the doorway, the way he always had, marveling. Olivia never did try to be her mother. But somewhere in the years, without either of them deciding it, she became something, not a replacement, but an addition, a second load-bearing wall in a house that had nearly collapsed. Emma had a mother, Sarah, who lived in songs and photographs and the shape of Emma's own eyes. And Emma had Olivia, who lived in the present, in the front row of every school play, in the terrible pancakes that got slightly less terrible over the years in the morning, that always, always came with someone there. "You know what you gave me?" David asked Olivia one night, years in the two of them. Older now. Grayer Emma off at college. And the apartment a bigger one now. But not much, because neither of them had ever wanted the castle quiet around them. "What's that?" "You gave me back the milk." David smiled. "You remember the first cafe?" I told you the cruelest part of losing Sarah was standing in the grocery store buying milk with nobody to text about it. And you said you'd buy the milk with me, metaphorically. He reached over and took her hand the way he had 10,000 times now, the way that had once made her cry. You've been buying the milk with me for years now, literally, every week. It's the most ordinary thing in the world, and it's the thing I was most sure I'd lost forever. Olivia squeezed his hand. You gave me more than that, she said. You know what you gave me. You gave me a reason to tear down the castle. I'd have died in it, David, rich and safe and completely alone in the biggest, emptiest castle in the world. You and Emma. You didn't storm the walls. You just stood outside them and were kind until I couldn't stand to be inside anymore. She looked at him. Do you remember the first night you told me the thing everyone wants is somebody who walks toward you instead of away? You were right. That's the whole game. You said it in a cafe to a stranger, and it turned out to be the truest thing anyone ever told me. They sat in the quiet two people who had been abandoned by their worlds and had built a new one, table by table, Thursday by Thursday, morning by morning. Do you ever think about it? David asked. How close we came to never happening. If Karen hadn't stood me up, if Richard hadn't stood you up, if you hadn't told your driver to stop at that exact cafe, if I'd left when I should have, 1,000 things had to go wrong for us to go right. I don't think about it, Olivia said. It scares me too much. She smiled. I just think about how glad I am that I asked if the seat was taken. Best question I ever asked, and you almost said yes that it was taken. I did say yes, and then I said it wasn't. You did, Olivia laughed. You were so flustered, you thought I was a prank. You were the opposite of a prank, David said. You were the realest thing that ever walked through a door. Emma called them years later, still from a hospital where she was doing her residency, exhausted and elated after a 30-hour shift, to tell them she'd saved someone. A parent. A young father brought in bad, and Emma had been on the team that pulled him through, and he was going to go home to his kids. I keep thinking about it, Dad, she said, her voice cracking with tiredness and something bigger. He had 2 little kids in the waiting room, and I kept thinking that's somebody's daddy, somebody's whole world, and we sent him home. We didn't lose him. And I know Mom, her voice caught, and David knew which mom she meant, knew she meant Sarah. I know Mom didn't get to go home, but because of her, because of all of it, I got to send him home. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's all connected. It's all the same thing. I understand exactly what you're saying, David said, and Olivia leaned in close to the phone, and the 3 of them, the man who'd eaten alone, the woman who'd torn down her castle, and the girl who'd learned that not everyone leaves stayed on the line together across all the miles the way family does. That night, after they hung up, David and Olivia stood at their kitchen window in the dark, and Olivia sang very softly Sarah's song, the wandering, half-remembered tune that Emma had taught her years ago in this same kitchen. She knew all the words now. She'd known them for years. And David listened to the woman he loved sing his dead wife's song in the dark, and he thought about a Thursday night long ago when he'd torn a menu in half in an empty cafe and been certain, absolutely certain, that he would be alone for the rest of his life. He had been so sure. He had been so completely, utterly wrong, because loneliness had felt permanent. Grief had felt like a life sentence. The empty chair across the table had felt like a verdict that could never be appealed. And then a stranger had asked if the seat was taken, and everything had changed. David Miller had learned the only lesson that ever really mattered, the one he'd spent 3 years too afraid to believe, that love is not a wallet that empties. It is a well that fills. That people leave, yes, but people also stay. And the staying is real, and it is worth every risk the leaving ever cost. That a home is not a place you protect by keeping the world out. It is a place you build by letting the right people in. He had eaten alone that night, a broken man, certain of nothing but his own emptiness. And a billionaire had joined his table, and neither of them had been alone again. They were a family. They had chosen each other, and they had stayed. And nothing, not death, not money, not any mean goose in any boardroom in the world was ever going to change that. The people who love each other stay. In David Miller's family, that was the only law that mattered. And it always would be.